Good evening.
Ba-ba-ba-boo.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
Burn in a ring of fire.
In light of the fact that we do not have our chair here tonight or our vice chair due to personal business, we need to now move on to the point of bringing the meeting to order, as well as for the board, according to board policies and protocols, to elect a temporary chair for the evening. Let me move right now to the election of that. Yeah, we'll call the roll. Would you please, sir?
Certainly. Mr. Ankuma is Mr. Castillo.
Here.
Ms. Gill.
Here.
Mr. Lawrence. And Ms. Ward. And we know Mr. Ankuma is here, but momentarily indisposed.
I can't get this rolling here. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open for nominations for chair for this board meeting of February 14.
Dr. Schiller, I nominate Justin Castillo.
Are there any other nominations? If not, nominations are closed. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. In the negative, Mr. Castillo, acting chair for the evening.
I would just quote The Godfather 3. Every time I think I'm out, they drag me back in. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Now we come to the adoption of the agenda. May I please have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Ankuma. All in favor, say aye. 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 Any negatives or abstentions? Very well, we have an agenda. Let's see, bear with me now. I think I'm logging onto board docs. I believe we are now at public comment, so thank you. In accordance with School Board Bylaw 2.30, the time for each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Additional written statements may be submitted to the clerk for dissemination to board members and for the record. I have 2 speaker slips in front of me, the first of which is Allison Kuchma. Welcome, Ms. Kuchma.
Hi. There you go. At the advice of Mr. Hunter, I'm actually going to read a statement from another parent, if that's okay, because she couldn't be here, so I'm going to forego my 3 minutes and read this statement. And I just don't know if it might run, a little long. It's only 5 paragraphs, so. I'm reading this on behalf of Christina Rice from 106 South Lee Street. I'm writing to request an audit of Falls Church City Public Schools special education, much like was performed for ESOL. An audit will reveal needs for effective targeted training of staff as expressed in the last SPEAC meeting by staff and school administration that cannot be provided in-house with limited time and current resources. My children, Christina Rice's children. My children have attended Falls Church School since 2006. My oldest daughter of 5 is in special education and is nonverbal. She has extreme communication difficulties and is very challenging to teach. Over the years, we've had our ups and downs with Falls Church, with generally well-meaning staff who are challenged to provide appropriate support and meaningful education to our daughter. We are currently working with the principal, staff, and administration at George Mason High School to adjust our daughter's program to help her to learn to communicate with effective and research-based methods and to have an inclusive, safe, and healthy environment at school. We have requested free staff training for the last 2 years now, specifically in aided language stimulation, without a response. This would be our daughter's version of learning sign language, as well as other training that we have requested every year she has attended Falls Church City Public Schools. We have not had co-training of teachers, paraprofessionals, service providers, and parents since 2006. Our daughter will turn 20 in June and is only eligible for 2.5 more years of education and therapies in her lifetime. College and voc rehab programs are not an option due to the significance of her disability. Time is of the essence. We feel our daughter's learning is just as important as any other student's, and we have had continual struggles for years with getting Falls Church Special Education to follow through and monitor intentional and effective educational practices. We are aware of many other families who have had similar experiences. An audit would also reveal needs for supervision of implementation of IEPs. Other challenges include supervision and needed training for paraprofessionals who provide the majority of our daughter's educational support. For example, although receiving in-house behavioral training and instruction on how to engage students, our daughter's paraprofessionals through the years continue to send artwork home that they themselves created while our daughter sat and watched for hours. We gave up and pulled her out of art class, her only opportunity at that time to be included in class with typical peers. And there's just one more paragraph. The number of students in special education continue to grow in Falls Church. Indeed, another one of my children is awaiting an eligibility meeting. My hope is that the school board will take a deeper look at the outcomes for students with the most needs and plan, budget, and request effective training and supervision to provide our students with the free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment that is actually their civil right under
Thank you, Ms. Critchlow.
IDEA. Thank you.
All right, next we have Amanda Blanchard.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be back. As you know, the ick is going through our system. So it's hit Mr. Kelly and I pretty hard the last few weeks. Just wanted to welcome you to hopefully our last evening before we submit a budget request to the city. If it's not, I'm happy to join you again next week. But just to point out a couple of things, I'm encouraged to see that we are making good progress and that we are able to do a lot of the things that we want. It would be amazing if we could give steps increases to everyone and percentage increases. I know that's probably not possible, but do keep in mind that'd be lovely. Do want to make sure that we clarify this evening, and I think Mr. Kimball may help me on that cause, to make sure that we are not shortchanging our support staff and paraprofessionals on the adjustment to their contract and how that might impact them financially. So I think he's going to make sure that we clarify for that for them and for us as to that 5% and how that impacts their contract days. Additionally, as the local association, we want to make sure that we put TJ staffing kind of at the priority as well. Remember, they have 800 students, and where some of the other schools are lower than that, and they're not necessarily getting those additional staff, potentially, assuming on what we do with our budget request and our submission of that. They're struggling, not only just with materials, but with the number of students in classes because of the capacity of the building and the number of students they serve. I look forward to this evening. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Blanchard. Next up, we have Kieran Sharp. Welcome, Mr. Sharp.
My name's Kieran Sharp, 408 Southwest Street. I provided a 4-page report, and actually with the links that are involved, it could be quite a bit longer, but it also has some gaps to it, I must admit, in the sense that permanent modular buildings are in use. They're in use in a local school district, and there are many examples around the country where they're already in use. And I want to emphasize that the word, the term here is permanent modular buildings, and not the kind that I think many people automatically think of when they hear the word modular. They're thinking about trailers, temporary buildings that are added onto the site for a very short period of time. This is a a project at our campus that I think could benefit greatly from using the modular approach to the extent feasible. And I will say that while there are examples, the extent is not necessarily 100%. But I think you'll see from the examples that I provided here of particularly a high school called High Tech High in California and a rather large school in the Reading, Pennsylvania area, that this kind of construction is usable on a large scale, and it does come together not just with classrooms, but with multi-purpose rooms, auditorium, cafeteria, that sort of addition. And they all come together in a single unit within a much shorter period of time than is typical with the fully on-site construction. So I ask you to take a look at this report. I hope that many of you will take advantage of the opportunity to see the Polk School, which I think will be available to you sometime next week, and happy to follow up with questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Appreciate your coming out tonight and offering your perspectives. Thank you. Last call for any, have you filled out a speaker slip? Okay, well, why don't you just go do the paperwork real fast and then draw near. Or you can speak and then fill out your speaker slip. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Tom Johnson, 152 Rees Place in Falls Church. I'm the president of the Athletic Boosters Association at George Mason High School. I'm here tonight just to try to clarify, clear up some confusion that may exist with regard to ideas about the new high school. The boosters met last night. The athletic director, interim athletic director was there. Our basis for comparison is not the mega high schools around here in very wealthy areas. The basis for comparison is the Bull Run District. Some of you are familiar with it, some of you are not. Those are not wealthy school districts for the most part, but compared to them, with the exception of our stadium and the new turf field, our facilities, our indoor facilities are substandard. So bottom line, in terms of a new school, the boosters hope that the stadium, the turf and track, costing over $600,000 last year, will remain untouched, that there will be a second turf practice field. We have 4 lacrosse teams, 4 soccer teams in the spring. Current situation is really tough without a second turf field. We need 6 tennis courts for competition. And then on the gyms, the proposal to eliminate one of the 3 gyms at the new high school would be fine, but the pit or whatever is used as the transformative vehicle needs to become a real high school competition facility. And the gym at MEH now is a nice middle school gym, but it is not a high school competition gym under the standards of the Virginia High School League. Seating capacity is way too low. It's 1,000 and needs to be at least 1,500, preferably more. The dimensions are too small. It's a barely legal floor with 84 feet. It needs to be 94 feet like everyone else in the Bull Run District. The entrance is directly onto the court. It's unsafe. It needs to be on the side. The training rooms aren't there, and when there's serious injuries like last week, when crutches are needed, the trainer or whoever has to run back to the high school to get whatever's needed for those serious injuries. You need 4 locker rooms right there. Saturday night we had a doubleheader with girls using the boys' locker room and vice versa. There was a walk-in incident. We had to put the visiting teams in a classroom with some sort of partition. We had the Central Woodstock boys on one side, the Strasburg girls on the other. Not acceptable. There are access issues for the disabled because the bathrooms are upstairs. The repair supplies are needed right there, and ice and water has to be carried over from the high school. A lot of scheduling conflicts with MEH. In terms of the time limit here, I just wanted to mention that an all-purpose room or wrestling room is needed. Every other school in Northern Virginia has that. It's important in terms of safety. Those mats cost $8,000 each, and they're being damaged constantly. because they're stored in the auxiliary gym, and you've got basketball players, PE students, parents climbing on them, et cetera. We can't do wrestling at the high school because those mats can't get downstairs, so we need that. And last couple of points, the weight room only can hold 15 people now. It's old and unsafe. The equipment is unsafe. Needs some sort of room for that. And every other high school in this area has an indoor cage for baseball, softball, and all the bad weather we have. We don't have that, and that's needed in either this wrestling all-purpose room or a new competition gym. And I guess the final points, if I may.
Very briefly.
Points to increase community support, the idea of an indoor hanging track above the, for community use, above the competition gym, more rec basketball usage by having a court big enough for using the width of the court instead of just the length, bleachers in the auxiliary gym to cut down on the damage to the floor, and heard it before, but a swimming pool, speaking as a former high school and college swimmer, a swimming pool that would bring in a lot of rental money, if nothing else, as far as we can figure out.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. All right, unless there's any other public comment, we will now move to the next item on the agenda, which is the closed meeting. Would someone please move us into closed, please?
You don't need to if you're fine with the personnel.
Are we,
All the personnel is there for your review. There's nothing that we have to go through with you detailed. Be happy to go in closed session and go through, but they are the appointments and resignations and those matters.
so if anybody is inclined to move us into closed, please do so. All right, seeing no motion, we will then move to, we'll save this for the consent agenda. We'll move ourselves then into the recognitions and reports.
Ladies and gentlemen, the audience, we're working on this month a school board appreciation for all the incredible commitment and dedication and professional manner by which our board members compose themselves, and the many hours that they spend away from their families and their work. And as a little bit of a way to say thank you to all of you, our schools have put together a variety of different recognitions, and they gave you the cards and the letters in front of you. And I hope that during sometime this evening before you leave, you take a look at what came in about 5:30 tonight from the middle school and everything else from all the schools. And we wanted to, as a staff, thank you for all you do. And because you're so sweet, all of you, we thought that you deserve something sweet. And so we actually went shopping for it today, so that you know. I like to tell you that these were those things that we went out and got for you, but the truth of the matter is they've been repurposed. They were put into someone's office, and when they were taking them down today, we decided we're going to bring them here. I was supposed to tell you them that, right? But again, we hope that you will take these with you, and in case you didn't get something for your sweetheart, there he is. Save you from having to go shopping.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schiller. I would say this will help bind some of the wounds that may have been opened by having this meeting on Valentine's Day.
In that case, you can take mine. You need it more than I do.
And in that spirit, we aspire to make this a non-marathon meeting. I would thank everyone who contributed to this in this day and age where the commitment to public education at some levels of our government is not a given. It is very heartening to see that there's the support like this, and it certainly makes the job worthwhile.
And of course, at your seat is your certificate of recognition. If the budget wasn't so tight, we would have framed them for you.
Next year, Dr. Schiller. All right, now we go to the consent agenda, the next item, and I would seek unanimous consent to approve the consent agenda. Seeing no objection, that is so ordered. Now we will move to item 7, the budget discussion. We have listed on our calendar that the school board budget will be adopted no later than February 28th, which is 2 weeks from today. I will highlight for the community that there is a good chance, I would say a high probability, that the board will be voting on the final budget next week. And I just wanted to put that out there. We have other action items, including our superintendent search, which will be closing on the 24th, and we're going to have that, as well as the George Mason project that will push us to address those issues. So the plan, just for the community's benefit right now, will be to probably vote on the 21st. Having said that, we still have plenty to talk with respect to the budget, and with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Schiller.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. As you know, this has been an ongoing process since very early December, when you gave guidance to me to make it as transparent as possible. This afternoon, I sent to our staff and community my 6th budget memo that highlighted where we are today in light of some of the information we received about revised revenues over the weekend. And we're very pleased to be able to provide you in your board docs here that we responded as requested to write brief impact statements of the positions that we deem necessary for this school district's operation. And you have that for your review as talking points, as well as why we need ESOL teachers, why we must fill the mandated special ed, why we have added 40,000 square feet to our facilities without adding a custodian, and it goes on. So one document that I have for your review and any questions you would have would be the impact statements that we have to date. And I will turn now over to Hunter Kimball, who has constructed that marvelous budget tool that everyone has been using. And I want to point out, I'm so appreciative of the staff who spent time in working through the budget tool on their own, individually, and who sent to us comments and recommendations and ideas, and realized how very difficult it is that this board is tasked with trying to fit everything in when there's not enough funding. And so with that in mind, Hunter, thank you for putting that tool together. We've worked long and hard on it, and we're at the point now for the final board input for your possible consideration for action next week, Mr. Castillo and members of the board. And so, Hunter, would you just bring us up to date of what transpired over the weekend and what the budget tool that the board has before it on board docs that you sent out on Sunday, I guess it was, what we learned over the weekend in terms of our final figures, at least as we understand it from revenues?
Yes, sir. Couple of things. We did receive, I believe, either yesterday or this morning, news from the city manager that, in fact, given the real estate assessments where they've come in and other bellwethers in terms of projecting a budget for next year, that we are indeed looking at a 2.7% organic growth in city revenues overall, which is the number that ultimately we had landed on in terms of using this model. In addition to that, the money committees did release their reports last week, and we received information from the Department of Education in terms of specific funding streams that have changed since the governor put forth his proposed budget in mid-December. Looks like we'll be receiving more sales tax. There appears to be some sort of a salary improvement in there. There seems to be a difference between the Senate and the House, but they both seem to have some form of that. There are changes to other categories as well. Essentially, the net change would be approximately additional $44,000 to the good and additional state revenue to Falls Church. In addition to that, late last week, we did receive renewal information on our workers' comp insurance policy. We had taken that out to the market and came back with some savings, with actual savings there, where previously we had anticipated a rate increase. And I think that's pretty much the items. And essentially, between these changes and the confirmation of the 2.7%, we're about $100,000 to the good. And essentially what that means is, given the tool as we reviewed it last week with the staff recommendations, that assuming an organic 2.7% growth in city revenue, the board would be able to cover the following items: a step increase for all professional staff, a 5% increase to the salary scales of support staff. Assume there would be no step with that. The support staff would get their entire salary improvement in terms of an adjustment to their scale, a cost of living adjustment, adjustment to the leadership administrative team of 3%. This would not be across the board. It would have to be distributed through work with Dr. Schiller in terms of putting a new admin scale into place. So you have a professional staff step increase, supports staff 5% adjustment, and leadership 3% adjustment. Assumed in here would be entering into a 4-year lease of a computer refresh. We would also realize additional revenue from the sale of existing computer equipment that's in the school board's inventory. It would restore schools' materials and supplies budgets to FY15 levels. That would be covered. That has a price tag of about $114,000. We could cover that within the existing growth. Increase the contingency to approximately 0.5% of the budget, and this would be accomplished primarily through the sale of the equipment, that we could designate funds from the sale of equipment to the contingency, as well as to add a part-time bus driver, which is necessary for enrollment growth, and to cover the expense of adding 2 additional custodians for the square footage that's been added at Thomas Jefferson, Jesse Thackeray, and also in anticipation of the Mount Daniel project and the additional space that will be added there. That would bring the city transfer up to about $40,790, which was an increase of 2.7%, and from what I've learned from the city staff, it would have no impact on the real estate tax rate.
For those who are not been close to what we've been working on, what Mr. Kimball has just identified are the funds that were remaining after the fixed costs and after the mandated special education positions that we must include in our budget. So we are taking care of all that's necessary to keep the place rolling, as well as to take care of the first level of required staffing. So what Mr. Kimball's identified is now what was remaining of about 1.7 million to now we've been working on a priority of what are the greatest needs. It's not to say that those that are beyond this are not of great need, and that's what the board had asked us to do. Mr. Castillo, do you want to speak to that before?
I guess the first thing that I would say is with respect to the equipment revenues, I would like that to map that to one-time gain, since this is a one-time dividend, if you will. I want to make sure that we're not ameliorating recurring costs on a one-time basis and then down the road finding ourselves confronted with a bit of a gap over what we had expected before. And money is fungible, so I think you could find some one-time events that would map to the device return, I guess you'd call it. I'm sorry, Dr. Schiller, what was your other?
The point being is that what we've tried to do is to take us to the level of available funds. What we've done here is to try to outline and talk toward the fact that this would consume all the available funds under the 2.7% city guidance. And what the board had directed us to do last week was to identify those additional needs, and there are many that the district has, in light of enrollment growth, in light of historical funding, and to set forth a priority. All of them are needed, but which ones are mostly needed, so that the board can consider, if it wishes, to include this in a request that would be above the city guidance.
Understood. And I had some discussions with Mr. Webb about that today. I think we are in a position where there is organic revenue growth, the allocation of which I think is an open question, given the relative growth rates within our population versus the city as a whole. We understand and acknowledge that funds are not unlimited and that resources are scarce, and that demanding more of our citizens has to be done with care. At the same time, we are coming on a year where we come into this budget cycle in the hole. We have additional growth in enrollment, and we expect more of the same. So we are working very hard to, I think, stay within the confines of what is fiscal reality, while at the same time acknowledging that we are charged by the Constitution of Virginia to provide a free, high-quality education to all K-12 students. And we need to acknowledge that that may require that we go over and above what organic revenue growth is, which itself is a construct of sorts. I mean, there is nothing written in stone that things should or should not change to match increases in demand. Last year, the city council saw fit to do what one member called a tax holiday. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge there are pressures. So I think we are working and have worked very diligently to go for needs rather than wants. I would preview for the record that there may be additional demands next year, given how enrollment and staffing rise. It's something of a lumpy process where we may be in many grades right at the policy level, which means if we just add one or two incremental students, we're going to see increased staffing needs. But we are working very hard, and we have worked very hard to be responsible both to the citizens of Falls Church as well as to the students that we are charged with serving. I'm sorry, Dr. Schiller, I'm a lawyer, and some people think we get paid by the word, so.
Well, then you must be paid very well.
Any questions for Mr. Kimball or Dr. Schiller on this? Mr. Ankuma?
So, Hunter, I'm not trying to create any additional work for you, but given where we are, given what we know is likely to happen next year with your projections for enrollment and then schools and all of that, is it possible to even project out a budget for next year? I know we're working on this year, but I'm concerned about how this will impact your next budget cycle. As in, are the decisions being made here that you can't pull back or impact next year's budget cycle? Just give me some sense of, and you don't have to do it today, but hopefully in the next few days, but before next week, if we can. It would help me understand, all right, are we setting ourselves up for something that's not sustainable, or what can we look at? And it'll help me with these different categories.
You know, it's certainly possible to take step back and take a larger picture, especially since so much of our costs are driven by student enrollments. right now, our health insurance came in at a reasonable rate this year. I would have to confer with the general government staff to see what we might project for next year. At this point, it looks like the VRS rate has now calmed down a little bit and smoothed out, at least for a year or two, although that may be subject to change as well, as the VRS is not yet fully funded. But really, in doing such an endeavor, I would look towards those student enrollments where we project them to be, and can certainly take a stab at that.
Or better still, just focus on we've got some stuff that doesn't change.
Yep.
So you can leave
Yes.
that alone.
Yep.
And sort of focus more on any variables that you think could impact that. Would
We
be
can
very
establish a certain level of assumptions
helpful. Absolutely.
in terms of what, and then maybe project out what, assuming those things took place,
What would happen?
what would happen in terms of what kind of revenue would be needed to sustain what you would have here.
Have here, and exactly. Okay.
Will do, sir.
Thank you.
Other questions? The only other thing I would say here is that we did get a very helpful chart running into 6 pages of the impact of not adding requested positions. And I would point that out to the community as well as to members of the board, that sets out very concrete statements of what the consequences could be as a result of not keeping abreast with enrollment growth. The other thing I would point out is that it's frequently the case that people think that, well, incremental growth in the population simply requires incremental growth in classroom teachers, and it's much more complicated than that. For example, with respect to custodial staff, we have seen a substantial increase in square footage for several years without having had any incremental rise in custodial staff. Administrative staff, central office is, actually, they do things that add value here, despite what some people may say, that they're just a cost center. They help keep the cogs turning in this system. And so we need to understand that it doesn't just come down to a question of if there's X percent increase in the student population, that we just need some more classroom teachers. It is more complicated than that. I do think we run a lean operation here, and we do have people wearing many hats. So, we move next to our, yes, Mr. Lawrence, I'm sorry.
Sorry, just a couple quick things, not really questions, but comments. One thing, in the positions that are justified, and in the chart that Justin just mentioned about, the possible impact of not filling them, in our list, we have, positions that are checked off that we would like to fund. Below that, if my math is right, we have over $1.6 million in positions for next year that were requested by the principals, by the teachers, that we have not funded. So I want to make sure that people look at it and they understand there is 1.6 million in people that we have not funded because we do not think it would be financially sustainable to do that. So I just want to make it clear that we have drawn a line, and below that line there is still a lot that is still requested. So that's my first point. One, just so people know, I've asked staff to look at what would it cost to restore paras, substitutes for paras to Mount Daniel, because I think Mount Daniel next year is going to have a very hard time with construction, and they need all the help they can get. I've also asked that they take a look at maternity leave. I found out that we don't pay maternity leave. Apparently, DC gives 8 weeks, Arlington gives 2 weeks. We don't give anything, which surprised me, so I've asked them to look at that. And finally, I've suggested to everybody, which isn't really part of the budget, but when we passed tuition a few weeks ago for both Jesse Thackeray and the high school, one thing that Justin and I found out was that our teachers and staff don't get a break on tuition if they have kids who will go here if they don't live here. And they're also not at the front of a line if there is a line. So we're also looking at that, which would be, something that wouldn't break the budget, it wouldn't affect every teacher, but we've got lean time, so it's not just a question of a step increase or a COLA or a salary adjustment. It's also doing things that help the quality of life and make people feel more appreciated. So I just wanted to make it clear that, A, there's a lot in here that we would like to fund and we can't, and we haven't, and we're not going to ask for it. And B, there's a whole lot of little things that we're also trying to do to just make people feel more appreciated and to make this a, an even better place to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Any other questions or comments? Yes, so I'll just close by saying that we have worked very hard. There are substantial unmet needs and wants that are out there. We continue to work diligently to try to map we're trying to get to the art of the possible, as they say. I would ask everyone on the board if there are additional submissions or comments or inputs from the budget tool or otherwise, please to submit those as quickly as possible. Our agenda, items 7.02, 03, and 04, all state that we will be approving a submission to the city manager for the food service operating and community services budget. As we've discussed, we had previously messaged to the community that would occur no later than February 28th in the absence of Mr. Reidinger and Mr. Webb, and in deference to the community for any additional input. I would suggest that we do not proceed with approving the budget this evening. If anyone feels otherwise, it's obviously the will of the board that should prevail, but unless there's other comment or question, I would then proceed to item 7.05 on the agenda.
Mr. Castillo, if I could just make
Sure.
a few remarks before closing. And basically, my previous remarks took us down on the staff recommendation of those items to fund, which would stay within the idea of organic city growth. The board had received, discussed, and considered a number of additional positions beyond those at the last budget work sessions. And I would just like to point out what those are, where there seemed to be general agreement among the board members at that time that these were worthwhile, positions and items to request and include in the board's budget request, and where that might take it in terms of a request for the city council. At point 6, world language teacher at the high school, which would be shared with the middle school, again based on enrollments and class sizes. A kindergarten teacher and a paraprofessional, again based on projected enrollments and to keep the class size in the lower 20s within the school board's current policy. Both those positions would be needed. One item that was removed late last week, I think the board was notified about this, there was a .2 theater arts teacher at George Mason that upon staff digging deeper and working within the building, found a solution where that could be removed off the request list. Although Dr. Schiller and Ms. High and myself have identified that really the human resources area has been under a lot of stress recently, and are actually recommending moving up for consideration an assistant director for human resources as well. The request would also include clerical administrative support at Jesse Thackeray Preschool. This would help with lunches, serve as a clinic aide, just a general a pair of hands that can be used, as well as assisting the director there. And a half an ESOL teacher at Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. These additional items, these additional 6 positions would actually bring the request about 1% or 1 penny over on the tax rate, above that list that we have just provided. It would be a city transfer of about $41,200,000, or an increase of about 3.8%. And I would just ask that, again, between this meeting and next meeting, in terms of board questions, guidance, suggestions, to let us know what to include, what not to include in next week's budget request would be very helpful. Mr. Reininger, our vice chair, had actually requested that a detailed budget document be prepared for the board. It is possible for us to do that. However is we would have to know what exactly to include in that in the way of positions, because taking things in and out changes many line items, and the documents can't be produced instantaneously. So thank you, and my request again is if the board would like to provide us any input to staff or with each other during the next week, that would be most helpful, and I think be a big help in next meeting when the board ostensibly may be voting on this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Yes, I would say if we could get any additional inputs in by Thursday, Friday at the latest, that would allow staff to digest this, because there will be some number crunching, and there's going to be weighing of what should go in and what should go out. Any other questions for Mr. Kimball based on what he just said?
This time?
Yes, Mr. Ankuma.
No, I was just saying not now.
Okay, all right.
I'll have a submission or two by Thursday.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mr. Kimball, for all your hard work, and for that of your colleagues as well. We very much appreciate it, and we understand that there are a lot of moving parts here. This is always a dynamic time of year, and we thank you for your good humor and patience as we work through this. The only other thing I would say with respect to the budget is that we will have some juggling to do. We'll have some things that go in and some things that come out, and we should be prepared to be able to weigh those puts and takes next Tuesday night as we go into that. Unless there's any other budgetary discussion, I think we could then go to item 7.05 on our budget regarding the campus project. Dr. Schiller?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, last Tuesday at our workshop session, we explored a variety of different areas about how to move forward, predicated upon the town hall meeting and all the research that you've all been doing. And at that time, you made some determinations of a direction that you wanted to go with regard to memorializing your discussion last week with regard to the 3 options, as well as directed me to begin the work on a statement of work for a feasibility study for an architect to work through rendering and to take the steps forward. Before I go into the latter, let me pause here in that I had submitted to Chairman Webb and Vice Chair Reitinger over the weekend several resolutions taken from your discussion and direction last week about the 3 options, and Vice Chair Reitinger, with the consent of Mr. Webb, had authored a resolution that is here for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Schiller. This has been a long journey, and I think it continues to be a journey that will carry us forward to asking additional questions, to getting additional information. I think the work of the working group has been helpful in clarifying some of these issues, and at least getting us into the ballpark about what may or may not be advisable, feasible, and I thank the efforts of Ms. Gill and Mr. Lawrence. Also, we have to recognize that we have two members of council in the audience tonight. We have Ms. Connolly, who's worked hard on that as well, and Karen Oliver is here. Welcome. And so we are now coming to the winnowing process, if you will. We have options. I think we heard from the community visioning meeting last week. We had some strong messaging, some I think clear sense that perhaps at this point the scales have fallen from our eyes, and we now see things in a clearer way. That is not to say there's not additional work to be done, or that we have a clear path forward. We have some notional information, and I think now we have to get some additional information. If and when an RFP issues, I think it's important for all of us to understand that commits us to nothing. Where it's going to be part of an educational process where we can make a decision to proceed or not, or to change course. And so I think if we continue getting smarter about where we are and what we can do and how we can do it, I think that's all to the good. Again, in the absence of Mr. Reidinger and Mr. Webb, we may feel somewhat constrained. I'm happy to open this up for discussion as to how we would like to proceed, what we would like to entertain, what we would like to commit ourselves to doing based on what we know that Mr. Webb and Reidinger have stated last week and at other times. Or another thing we could certainly do is defer action on this until next week. But having gone off a bit, I will open the floor to thoughts. Ms. Gill.
I would defer action on this until our chair and vice chair are back. Also, the working group will be meeting again on Thursday, and I know Vice Mayor Connolly has been working really hard with Ms. Hardy on putting together all the information from the community forum, so we'll have that to digest before we make any decisions or move forward. I think it'd be good to defer that.
Any other thoughts? Mr. Lawrence.
I agree. I think we should defer to next week, but I think we should defer with the goal of passing a resolution like this with a date specific about issuing an RFP for the school part. I don't think we should just have another work session next week and talk about doing something. I think we should actually commit to doing something next week, but I do think waiting till next week is a good idea.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Mr. Ankuma, you look like you've got something to say.
I was going to say, sounds good to me.
Okay. Ms. Ward? All right, well, again, I would thank the working group and Dr. Schiller and all the staff at FCCPS who have worked very hard on finding a path forward. I would ask Dr. Schiller, have you any additional information based on prior procurements? A, phasing, B, timeframe, so that we have a clearer notion of how much runway we have left?
Yes, sir. If you would, we attached a few documents for your consideration. As you know, I sent you a memo over the weekend, which is essentially if we're going to go forward with a statement of work for a feasibility study of a new high school, I need direction from the board with regard to what to include in it and whether or not certain items that have been assumed and that I've been working with based on visioning planning of a few years ago are still your thinking, and or what adjustments you want. And again, what you would consider as requirements and what we would want to list as alternates. So that's one thing, and I set out for you a series of questions that I think you have here in your board docs that I need some direction on. I don't need it tonight if you don't wish, but certainly by next week if you want to stay tuned to moving forward on a schedule. I think as importantly, or more importantly, I've been working over the weekend with Bob Jones to pull together a schedule, a time frame. a draft schedule for your consideration. And if you all could turn to that, I would like to try to explain this as well. When the board docs became active today, Mary Beth Connolly stopped by to talk with me a little bit about the schedule, because again, she's shepherding now the joint or the work group, and Bob Jones and I were able to explain how this process that we're suggesting that you consider, and one which I'm most familiar with, folds into your PPEA, but it has the added dimension of being able to develop up front through an architect and working with us to design what you really want in a building, so that by the time you make a decision about going out for a referendum, you have the rendering. You know what's in it. The community knows what's in it before you go out for it. But if you would, for a moment, walk through this with me, and I try to talk about as you can see, this is a draft. And there are some pre-RFP services that we would be asking to go forward. And here are some timelines that take you to a referendum in November, as you have so indicated these months that I've been here. And that is that we would finalize here at the board, or whomever elsewhere, what you want in a statement of work for a feasibility study. Much like the way we built this year's budget, we did everything upstream, laying out what it is precisely we're looking for before we go out for a bid. My experience has been by tightly defining what it is you're looking for, and then getting back not only renderings and designs of what you can and cannot do, but they will give to you also the best estimate of costs. And then you can determine what's in and what's out. Rather than later on, after you go out for an RFP, you get something back, and then, uh-oh, we can't afford. Now you know up front what's going to be there, what's not going to be there. So with that in mind, the statement of work, if we tighten it way down and we define what it is we're looking for, the back end of where you put money away for your contingency and your escalation, you have better control over change orders or what-ifs. And you're looking at, in most cases here, between $7 to $10 million in your contingency and escalation costs. You can manage those more effectively, thereby driving down your ultimate true cost. So walking through this process, if you wish to consider it, is that providing a finalization of the project, meaning what it is that you want in this feasibility study to be looked at. We would then submit the feasibility study RFP at a time where we could submit it as early as the 28th of February to within somewhere the 13th of March for your consideration, to be able to evaluate the proposals. That would take us another month under 10160. The architectural feasibility study to move toward a completion date of May 17th, so that you as a city board, as a board and the city council could evaluate the feasibility study, make your final determinations, and then to approve moving out, stepping out, which would take you now to the point where, as you can see under referendum, you have plenty of time then from June to prepare for your referendum vote until November 17th. The folks then would have a pretty good idea of what would the new George Mason High School be looking like, what will it have in it, as well as you're going out with a number that you're going to feel fairly comfortable with regard to what you ask for with your referendum. So it's not just asking for a piece of some money and then you'll decide on where to go. So then, as would lay out here, you would have a PPEA GMHS kickoff meeting somewhere in June. You confirm your project goals and your priorities. You develop your education specifications, you develop your level of quality specifications all this summer, and now you're moving out to develop your draft PPEA conceptual RFP, and that could be as early as July, as late as early of August of this year. And as you can read through here, the work that would be done is very intense August through October, to the point where you would even have a short list ready to determine who, if the referendum passes. Under the PPEA detailed stage proposal, you move from conceptual to detailed, September through October. You have then ready for your referendum at the same time that you have your detailed RFP, and you have then your proposals, and you're going forward with your referendum. And at that point, you can see all through the winter, a year from now, February, March, and then April, May, the design phase, your agreements with your PPEA comprehensive agreement negotiations, you execute your comprehensive agreement, and you can read through here how you roll out to the day that you would be able to complete your project, estimated at June 21. So, folks, here is, I guess, what you've been asking for about if you want to move forward in a certain way that will give you more definitive, detailed notion that you'd be able to message for your community and have a better handle on. I would urge you that if you move forward in any of this, that you're going to need a project manager. I mean, you're going to need someone who's going to ride over this one from not only the construction piece, but from making sure educationally it's meeting what it is that you're expecting in time frame. So this is a way to approach it. It's a little bit different than last time that we went out. It's something that Bob Jones couldn't be here tonight, but it may not be available to work group on Thursday. But we've spent a lot of time over the weekend working on this to try to bring to you a way in which to consider going forward that might help out early on to know what it is that you can get, and then you're going to answer the questions for yourself right soon. Well, if we can afford this, we can get that. Or this is how much it's going to cost to get all of this in requirements. But if we can't afford it at the requirement level, then we could substage it in a referendum with separate questions. If this community wants to support a pool, it could be asked for the pool. There are a variety of ways to structure a referendum to then allow the community to help shape what it's capable of and willing to support. It'd be nice if we had world enough time and money to be able to put everything in. That's not going to happen under the economic circumstances of trying to bring in the school. So that is why, if you think about this sequence, and I will spell this out on Thursday to the work group, it would be so important then to nail down these kinds of questions that I asked of you with regard to how do you want to allocate square footage? How many gymnasiums do you want and need? How can you satisfy the competing demands of your wrestling program, your cheerleaders, your locker room needs, your competition needs, in order to be, yes, like the other Bull Run conference folks, comparable. You're not asking for the world, you're asking for what would make you standard in those with whom you compete. Or if you decide that you don't want to have 98,000 square feet dedicated to what had been set forward, that everything's been predicated on 3 gymnasiums, and you want to look at other options of 1, 2, or a variety of different things. It'll also give me an opportunity to, one more time, I've not adjusted or even studied until it started this weekend, the amount of space that is being dedicated to each area, the administrative support area or the academic area. with your permission and direction, I would like to go back and dig in there, because all we have been working on for the last few months that I've been here is what had been previously submitted as a referendum that did not go forward, but then it was scaled back somewhere. But yet, as everyone I've talked with, there doesn't seem to be consensus as to what must be in there. And I would think that we would want to nail that down. That do we really want, and do we need 11 classrooms for every academic area, or is it 12, or is it 10? And what other options may there be in order to consider, as I raise here, do you want to, in this 300,000 square feet, there is not 12,000 square feet as for your central office in here. This does not include your addition to MEH. How do you want to structure that? What other options do you have? And I've laid out some of those options for you and can show you what some of those options might look at, and be prepared to go forward, talk with you in that respect, if indeed you want everything on the table. I think what we're challenged with here is how to balance a price point that this community will support, so you have your new high school that you definitely need. And how do you get everything that you need, and how you make sure that the city and the board can move in an informed fashion forward with whether or not it wishes to move into economic development, and how many acres it wishes to move into that. So we're trying to balance three inextricably linked components. The need for a new school to accommodate anticipated growth, the determination about economic development and how many acres, and to what extent there's a price point this community will come together to support. You have one shot at this referendum. Interesting thing, people from whom I'm renting an apartment here love this school district, love this city, been here a long time. They're like a number of other people who are here. Their children went through and had a marvelous educational and athletic experience here at George Mason. Gone on to top flight schools, going on to adult lives. They bleed Falls Church City. They love it. And they said to me last night, try to work with the city council and the board to find a place where we can continue being proud of our educational system, so other families can enjoy what we've enjoyed with our children, but also do what's right for all of us who have to pay for the taxes so we can stay in the city, and also, as they chuckled, see our property values grow because of the quality of the system and the prize. So, that kind of stuck with me in terms of the fact that here's someone talking with me who loves this city and wants to be here and wants to support the next generation of children who come through the school and want to find a way to afford it. So that's where I am, and I know, I wish I was an attorney being paid for each word. So, but the point being is that I'm
Showing
not,
a
so I
great
will
deal
shut
of
up at this
promise.
point.
Well, thank you, Dr. Schiller. So I think the bottom line is please communicate as quickly as possible your thoughts about some of these questions to him so that can get incorporated into this. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Schiller at this point? Mr. Lawrence.
More a question for everybody else. We all know that the council voted to form this economic development task force committee, whatever, last night. In the past, when it's come to the high school, whenever we've set something up, we've both set it up together. We've both passed resolutions saying the same thing. So since this is going to be, a work session next week, I'm just throwing out there, should we do the same for this? Since, let's face it, the land they're talking about developing economically is the schools. And in the past, every time we've set up a joint force, whether it included, EDA and Planning Commission, like our first one a couple years ago, or the latest one, both bodies passed the same thing agreeing to it. So I'm just saying, let's think about whether we want to, and if we don't want to, let's just make sure that we know we don't want to and do it on purpose. That's all. I'm not sure whether I care one way or another. This thing needs to get done. We need to have representatives on it. I'm not sure if I'm convinced having us do the same thing makes a difference, but if we don't, it would just be something that we've not done in the past. That's my only point.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Ms. Ward?
I have a question. Would this be a joint group? Would we all be working together as one, or do we have our own separate commission?
As I understand it, it's going to be like the working group that Aaron and I are on right now, but what it would have is 2 city council members, 2 school board members, 2 from the EDA, 2 from the planning commission. So it's not joint in the sense of the 2 bodies as wholes, but it's joint in the sense of the bodies are both appointing representatives to it.
That's what I meant. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? The only thing I would say on that part is that you know, a necessary but not sufficient condition to really getting traction on the economic development piece is defining what the footprint of the new school would look like. And so, again, I think as we look at this, this is a long journey with a destination ultimately, but we are going to have to proceed to define what parcel or parcels are available when, under what circumstances, for that to really gain traction, which is not to say that it's not a good idea to proceed immediately, but that there's not going to be an immediate go, no-go kind of decision. So my clear sense from the board, and one that I share, is that we can and should defer making this decision until next week, when we may not be at a full strength, but we'll be, any luck, at 6 instead of 5. If there are no other questions, then we can move to the next item on the agenda, which is future agenda items. Does anybody have any future agenda items they would like to float? Ms. Ward?
Not right now. I think we have enough on our plate for the next month or so, but I'll definitely catch up with you in a month.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Lawrence?
Well, we've named some before. Could we start keeping a running list like before? Because at this point, I'm not sure what's on the list and what's not. So I don't know if I want to add anything to it. I mean, I know we've had things like, do we develop a social media policy for the board? Prior review is coming up, things like that, but at this point, I'm not sure what's on there. So for the next meeting, if we could just develop a list of everything that we've already said we wanted, that would be a good starting point.
Yes, and certainly I think one big bucket should be policy review, and then we can track which discrete items are. So that would be great. Well, I think unless I hear otherwise, there seems to be a sense that we have substantial work on our plate, such that we needn't add to it at this point. Indeed. So next week, as Dr. Schiller just noted, will be an action-packed meeting with a lot of highly consequential issues to be resolved. So do your homework, everybody. With that, now I will go to item 9.01, the superintendent's report. And
Yes, in deference to St. Valentine, I think I will pass this week. You know pretty much from my Friday memos in terms of where we are in the district. And each day that goes by and visiting the schools and classrooms, I'm still always amazed of wonderful things that are taking place there.
Thank you, Dr. Schiller, and I would say that you are also bearing the burden of this day with a wife, many hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, so thank you for your work, and
Add to that, it's her birthday tomorrow. So other than that, all's well.
okay. Well played, sir.
take both of these
That's right. You just FedEx those down to her tomorrow. All right, now we will come to board and student liaison comments, if any. We'll go from right to left tonight. Ms. Gill.
I've just been to the Athletic Boosters meeting, which was very helpful. I learned a lot about our current state of our athletic facilities and what we would need going forward. I wasn't aware of the locker room issue at MEH, which was very enlightening to me. Learning about the tennis courts, that we have 4, 2 of which we can use, but we need 6. So it was helpful to sit down with them and hear more about what our athletics, our high school and middle school athletics need. So thank you. And mulch sales and all those other things are going on as well.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence.
Just 2 quick things. One, tomorrow night, I believe, is the joint PTA meeting on the budget. I don't remember where.
Mustang Cafeteria.
Mustang Cafe. So please come out, anybody who belongs to the PTAs. PTA membership is down, so if you have a child in the schools, please join. If you're a parent, please join. If you're a teacher, please join. If you've ever been a child, please join. And finally, I would just ask Dr. Schiller if you could specifically send a note to the SAOs, to SEEK and EEK and PEAK and everybody else, letting them know that our goal is to vote on the budget next week, since that would be a week earlier than we had originally targeted. We just don't want anybody to feel like we said the 28th and then they show up on the 27th to find out that we had voted on the 21st. So it shouldn't be a surprise, but if you could just let them know, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Ankuma.
I've had the pleasure of working with my new liaison assignments, the Band Boosters Special Education Advisory Committee, and the Falls Church Elementary PTA. 3 very energized groups. I'm proud to say I've had 2 of them come to speak at our budget meetings, which is, for a group that I haven't spent even a month with, it's very encouraging. The Band Boosters came to speak, as did Special Education, obviously, and I've met already a couple of times with the board of the Falls Church, I guess the elementary PTA. I'm looking forward to the meeting tomorrow. I just want to also add that I haven't had as much fun as I had Saturday night at the boys and girls basketball games, which we both won, by the way. And Tom, this was very informative about the facilities. I mean, for as much fun as we were having out there, if I'd known what was going on in the back, I think I would have been appalled. But this obviously informs what we do with this process that we're going through. So thank you so much for that information, as Ms. Gill already iterated. But I put in a plug for, if you guys want to have the highs and the downs, forget a roller coaster. Just go watch the boys' basketball games. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ankuma. Ms. Ward.
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of attending my first daycare advisory committee meeting last night, and I thoroughly enjoyed the members of this committee. It was a wonderful meeting, very dynamic group of people, and I have to say, it was a pleasure working with a budget that is operating in the black. Just saying. Anyway, I look forward to working with this committee again, and that's it. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ward. For my part, I attended a BIE meeting recently and was astonished and impressed at the number of initiatives. I'm sorry, Ms. Connolly's no longer here, but there's just a phenomenal amount of great work that's being done there, and so much creativity. So much commitment. It's really quite inspiring to see. And tomorrow I'll be at the PTA budget meeting in conjunction with my assignment to the middle school PTA. So with that, I will go now to the next item on our agenda, which is approval of the minutes of October 4th, October 11th, October 18th, November 1st, and also November 1st minutes for the joint school board and city council meeting. I'd seek unanimous consent to approve those minutes. Seeing no objection, that is so ordered. I will direct your attention to item 12 on the agenda that has new enrollment figures as well as line item budget status reports and a second quarter financial report for the general fund. And now at the relatively sane hour of 8:30, I would say we are adjourned. So, thank you very much. Have a good rest of your evening.